There are moments in life when your heart screams louder than your reason, when the absence of a certain person feels like a punishment, a void that echoes with memories and longing. But God is leaning in closer to you today, whispering something that your heart may resist, but your soul desperately needs to hear. I did not take them away to hurt you. I removed them to protect you. You've spent countless nights replaying what happened, asking why someone who once meant everything suddenly vanished, why the messages stopped, why the energy shifted, why the laughter turned into silence. But what you must understand is that their departure was not an accident, not a punishment, and not your failure. It was a divine rescue. That person you miss so deeply, the one whose name still lingers in your prayers, was connected to a spiritual weight you could not see, and God in His mercy severed the tie before it strangled your light. You may feel abandoned, but in reality, you were rescued. They smiled in your presence, but their intentions were often veiled in confusion, projection, jealousy, or manipulation. They were sent as a lesson, not a lifetime, and the longer you chase what God already closed the door on, the further you drift from the blessings meant to replace them. God is not trying to deprive you. He's trying to redirect you to guard your heart from the very cycles that once bruised it. Heaven watched what you couldn't see, heard the conversations behind your back, and felt the weight of your spirit each time you convinced yourself to stay hopeful about someone who was no longer spiritually aligned with your future. You were not weak for loving them, but you will become stronger for releasing them. They came into your life to trigger a deeper awakening, to teach you what your boundaries must look like, to show you what it means to pour love into yourself when another cannot return it. God saw how deeply you wanted to fix what kept breaking, how often you gave your last ounce of energy hoping they would finally see your worth. But the truth is, God always saw your worth, and He knew that if you kept holding on, you'd slowly forget who you are in Him. That's why He didn't ask your permission before closing the chapter. That's why the door slammed shut so unexpectedly. That's why no apology came. Because it wasn't about their explanation, it was about your protection. You may not understand it now, but one day you will breathe lighter and realize that what left you was never meant to carry you into the next season. They were holding you back more than they were holding you close. And if you keep chasing what God has removed, you risk delaying the very miracle that's already searching for your heart. There is someone being prepared right now who will see you the way God sees you. Someone whose presence will not leave you second-guessing, whose love will not feel like a war inside your chest. But you must clear the altar of old attachments so that the sacred promise can enter. God is calling you back to yourself, away from the mirage of a person you try to heal but were never meant to save. Let go, not because they were evil, but because their chapter in your story is done. And in the quiet that follows, you will start to feel heaven rushing in, refilling your heart with peace that does not come from their return, but from your release. God didn't remove them to punish you. He removed them to rescue the parts of you that were shrinking in silence. And if you could hear the conversations being had about your soul in heaven right now, you'd understand that this is not an ending. It's the beginning of your spiritual rebirth. Do not chase what God had to rip away to protect your divine calling. Something greater is coming, but only if you stop looking back. You have no idea how much heaven had to intervene to reroute your life before it was swallowed whole by a connection that looked like love, but was slowly poisoning your purpose. And the Spirit of God wants you to know right now that this separation was not random. It was sacred. While you sat there blaming yourself, drowning in questions, revisiting every conversation, wondering if one more message, one more compromise, one more sacrifice could have fixed what felt broken, the angels were already surrounding you, warring for your freedom in a realm you could not see, peeling away this person's energy from your life because your destiny depended on it. You saw them with human eyes, but heaven saw them in full spiritual truth. Not only who they were with you, but who they were when your back was turned, what they entertained behind the scenes, the curses they carried in their lineage, the emotional damage they refused to heal, the soul ties they never disclosed, the words they spoke over you when your name came up in their bitterness, the way their presence altered your alignment with peace. You fought for someone who did not even know how to fight for themselves, and in doing so, your soul became exhausted. But God, in His mercy, allowed it to crumble. Not because He wanted you to suffer, but because He could no longer stand to watch your heart erode in a situation that was draining you of your purpose. This was never about rejection. It was about divine redirection. And if you keep trying to rewrite a chapter God has sealed shut, you will only prolong the ache of a bond He already deemed dangerous. This person was not equipped to carry the version of you that God is building now. Their love was not deep enough to nourish the roots of your destiny. Their loyalty was circumstantial. Their presence, though comforting at times, was also slowly severing your connection to your higher self. And even when you prayed for restoration, God was answering you in a different way. He was not bringing them back. He was bringing you back to yourself. You see, God loves you too much to leave you in a situation that silences your light. He loves you too much to let your worth be reduced to chasing people who only know how to take. You were created to be loved effortlessly, not manipulated subtly. The energy you felt shifting wasn't your imagination. It was spiritual. Their assignment in your life had expired, and God didn't just remove them to protect you from them. He also removed you to protect you from yourself, from a version of you that was willing to accept breadcrumbs, the version that kept trying to prove your value to someone who couldn't even hold their own. He is calling you to release them completely, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, mentally. To stop checking their page, to stop stalking their silence, to stop holding your breath, waiting for an apology that was never rooted in accountability. What you are seeking cannot be found in someone who is never meant to stay. And though your tears are valid, your healing is more important than their closure. They may not know what they lost, but heaven does. And God is preparing someone who will never make you question if you are enough. But before that love can enter, you must become sacred with your own energy again. You must clean your altar. You must sanctify your heart. You must realize that not every absence is a loss. Sometimes it's deliverance in disguise. The person you keep chasing may have been a lesson, but they are not the reward. The blessing is in what God is preparing now. The new room, the new peace, the new clarity, the unshakable love, the unstoppable breakthrough. But none of it can rest upon a foundation that is still mourning a connection God had to break for your soul's survival. Let go, not out of anger, but out of wisdom. Stop trying to retrieve what heaven had to rescue you from. There's a spiritual promotion attached to your obedience, but you must walk away fully without looking over your shoulder. Because what's coming will never require you to beg, to bleed, or to betray yourself again. The soul God is preparing to walk beside you will recognize you by the way your heart speaks peace, not pain. But first, you must let the wound close. You must let heaven finish what it started. You must stop chasing them. God removed them because your life was about to collapse under the weight of what you refused to see. And now that you're free, the next chapter of your destiny can finally begin. There is a version of you that you have not met yet, a version that only exists on the other side of release. And God is waiting for you to finally step into that transformation by no longer holding space for what He has already taken His hand off of. You keep replaying conversations in your mind, analyzing every word, wondering if the distance could be reversed. But what you don't realize is that this person became a ceiling to your soul, not staircase. You weren't growing, you were shrinking. You were dimming your light just to be digestible for someone who was never meant to hold the fullness of your calling. They were a part of your story, yes, but not the entire book, and the longer you camp at the chapter they exited from, the more pages of your purpose remain unread. This isn't about bitterness. This is about discernment. Heaven watched as your heart kept forgiving what your spirit was choking on, And even though God allowed you to love them deeply, it was never so you would lose yourself in the process. The divine doesn't require obsession, confusion, or cycles that keep breaking you down and rebuilding you halfway. What heaven requires is your complete surrender, your willingness to trust that whatever God removes, He replaces with better, and not just better in the eyes of people, but better for your spirit. You were too entangled in their shadows to recognize that their proximity was delaying your promotion. You prayed for elevation, for peace, for purpose, but could not fully manifest while your heart was still tethered to a soul that fed your insecurity more than your growth. You gave chances. You gave grace. You gave time. And while they misinterpreted your patience as passivity, God saw your intentions and counted every tear. And when the time came to intervene, He did what only He could do. He closed the door without your permission, not to punish you, but to protect you from spending another year stuck in a place you had already outgrown spiritually. Stop fighting for access to what's been spiritually blocked. Stop grieving what was never anointed to last. You didn't fail them. You followed your heart, and now it's time to follow your faith. The connection you lost is not greater than the calling you are stepping into. And yes, it's hard. Yes, you still miss them. But you must understand, just because you felt love doesn't mean it was holy. Just because they were familiar doesn't mean they were your future. God isn't asking you to forget. He's asking you to be faithful. Because there are blessings on hold right now, divine appointments delayed, peace postponed, all because your hands are still reaching backward. The enemy would love nothing more than to keep you circling the same emotional desert. But heaven has a promised land with your name on it, and the only way to enter is by walking away without conditions, without compromise. Let your no mean no. Let your silence be sacred. Let your healing be louder than your pain. This is the season where God is refining your vision so that you can see people clearly, not through the lens of longing, but through the lens of alignment. If they had stayed, your soul would have stayed stuck. But now you are free, and with that freedom comes responsibility. The responsibility to stop chasing, to stop checking, to stop hoping for a resurrection God never ordained. What He's bringing is not a repeat. It's a resurrection of you, your power, your clarity, your joy, your creativity, your intimacy with Him. You were always enough. They just weren't ready. You were always chosen. They just didn't have the capacity to see it. And now, the greatest act of self-love is obedience. Do not go back. Do not entertain breadcrumbs when heaven has prepared a feast. Do not give front row seats to people who no longer honor your presence. This is the season where you reclaim everything that was buried under their inconsistency. You're not too much. You're not hard to love. You're not the reason they left. You are the reason God intervened, because He saw the war over your spirit, and He said, "Not this one, not my child. I have greater for them." So stop rehearsing the past and start preparing for what's next. Stop trying to resurrect what God buried. Stop trying to open a door that led you into storms. Heaven is waiting for your full yes. Let go. Let them go. And watch what God releases in your life when your heart finally agrees with His will. You were never meant to spend your life begging someone to see your worth when heaven already sealed your value with divine hands before you even took your first breath. And yet, for so long, you've carried the unbearable weight of wondering what you could have done differently, what version of yourself you needed to become in order to be enough for someone who was never sent to stay. But God wants you to understand now, with no more hesitation. This wasn't a rejection, it was redirection. That door didn't close because you failed, it closed because you were finally ready to be freed. And yes, it's going to ache. The soul remembers who it once trusted. But God is not asking you to numb the pain. He's asking you to place it in His hands so that He can redeem every part of you that was shattered under the illusion of what could have been. He saw how you fought for them in prayer. He heard the way you pleaded for their heart to change. He watched as you sacrificed your peace, your dreams, even your spiritual clarity, just to keep them near. But the truth you must embrace is this: God didn't want them to love you back. He wanted them to release you. So he stepped in and did it himself. Because he could no longer allow you to confuse history with destiny. That person was part of your becoming, but they were never your forever. And your spirit knows this, even when your heart resists. You saw the red flags. You felt the confusion. You sensed the spiritual misalignment deep inside. But you kept hoping your love would fix what only surrender could. God was never trying to punish you by taking them away. He was trying to resurrect the pieces of you that they buried under silence, manipulation, half-hearted efforts, and soul-draining cycles. You're not broken because they left. You're breaking free because they're no longer standing in the way of your healing. Heaven is not asking you to understand every reason right now. Heaven is asking you to trust that the removal is part of the rescue. You keep asking for peace, but you cling to the chaos that disrupts it. You want the promises of God, but you won't put down the patterns that contradict His word. You cry out for divine love, but you continue to make space for counterfeit affection simply because it feels familiar. But God's love does not confuse. It does not demand you sacrifice your self-worth. It does not manipulate your loyalty or demand your silence in the name of keeping the peace. True, divine love anchors you. It leads you closer to your purpose, not further from your identity. And that's why God had to remove this person, because no matter how much you love them, they weren't aligned with the divine plan that heaven has already spoken over your life. That person wasn't your soulmate. They were your soul test. And now you have passed. You've walked through heartbreak with humility. You've released what you thought you needed. You've let go, even when your hands trembled. And God saw it all. Every time you resisted the urge to reach out. Every time you cried in secret, but still chose obedience. Every time you felt unseen, but still chose to believe. And now comes the shift. Now comes the harvest. Because you dared to believe that what God has for you is not behind you, but ahead of you, and nothing lost will compare to what's coming. God is preparing someone who will meet you in truth, not confusion. Someone who will recognize your light instead of competing with it. Someone who will pray with you, walk with you, love you with a God-fearing heart that honors your soul and your scars. But you can't receive that if you keep watering the graves of relationships that were meant to die. You can't live in the fullness of promise while your spirit is still echoing the voice of someone who never saw your worth. The time has come. No more looking back. No more second-guessing what God clearly removed. No more shrinking yourself for love that was never real. You are being called into the next chapter, a chapter where your heart doesn't have to earn peace, where your presence is celebrated, not tolerated, where love is a reflection of God's presence, not a performance of survival. And when you finally stop chasing, when you finally say, God, I choose your will over my wounds, the heavens will open, the chains will fall, the blessings will flood in. Not because you forced them, but because you finally aligned your heart with the truth of who you are and what you deserve. Let the past be the past. Let the doors stay shut. Let the memory remain, but not as an anchor, only as a testimony. You are not who you were when you loved them. You are not the same person who stayed quiet just to keep peace. You are not that broken version of yourself anymore. You are becoming someone new, someone stronger, someone clearer, someone deeply loved by the one who removed that person not out of cruelty, but out of promise. So rise, reclaim your voice, reclaim your vision, reclaim your joy, and walk boldly toward the future that only began to unfold once they were no longer in the way. Heaven didn't abandon you. Heaven cleared the path for your destiny to begin.